So let's start here. A lot have been said about Luka Dončić summer transformation. Question for you is, what are your thoughts on Luka's summer transformation, and do you have a problem with it?
Listen, I really don't have a problem with Luka's transformation, nor I can really comment on the transformation itself or on anything Luka was doing because I really don't know. I don't think anybody really knows except for the people who were involved the most intimately. But I can comment on the article because most of us are making assumptions on the grounds of an article that was published in Men's Health, I think the magazine was. And there was some really bold claims in that article, which I didn't really appreciate, or the, let's say, evidence-based community didn't really appreciate how it was, let's say, described. First of all, the problem there was the mentioning of some methods like fasting, which involved not eating for prolonged periods throughout the day. Even there were two trainings, I think, on a day. One training, morning training, I think, it was scheduled to be fasted, and the claims there were to let's improve some glucose tolerance or decrease inflammation, and some claims that were not really supported by the evidence for, let's say, that method of fasting. And the limiting of carbohydrates were the next, let's say, red flag. We're talking about diet for athletes' performance. We want to limit the impact of it for injuries. And we want to do everything we can as nutritionists to maximize performance and to limit the probability for injuries. So limiting carbohydrates don't really do that. So we want to keep carbohydrates in the diet, especially when training, because limiting that really does not help the athlete in any significant way. And the third thing, I think, was limiting certain food groups, the grains, because of gluten and other foods for, I think the basis there was to limit inflammation and other health claims, again, that were not really supported. So we can't really comment on adult making decisions. An adult person can make decisions whichever they decide to or he wants, and that's not for me to comment on. I don't feel in that way. But the reason why I chose to spoke up was because in our practice, and I'm sure that goes for you as well, we work with young athletes. And young athletes like to copy everything that their idols do, as far as it goes for training and nutrition also. So every time that a very popular athlete talks about publicly about their, let's say, nutritional approaches or philosophies, we always see an incline or an increase in young athletes trying to copy that. Always what happens is that parents come, and it happened on numerous occasions after this was published. On numerous occasions, parents came, and the narrative was, what can I do because my kids won't stop eating bread, won't eat anything with sugar, started to go on morning trainings fasted. He has no energy, he's always irritated. I'm trying to get him to eat more, but he's always fighting me. And what can I do? How can I? He doesn't listen to me. I'm not relevant. And they ask for advice, and we always struggle here. Then what can we really do to break through, to show that there are limitations of copying these approaches that their idols, the athletes, use
Yeah,
in
for
their
sure.
transformations.
For
So
sure.
this was basically the main problem, the main issue that we both, I think, share. The influence on young developing athletes when copying nutritional approaches that are not communicated responsibly. So this is, I think, the main thing, are not communicated responsibly. And I think in this question, the approaches were not communicated responsibly.
For sure, for sure. And you mentioned the three big red flags. What many parents and also young athletes need to know, that athletes are not models. So fasting diet for or like a diet for a model or like a regular Joe cannot be copied on high level athletes or young athletes. So okay, my next question to you, as a nutritionist who is in the game for more than a decade. and with numerous experiences. How would then you go about if you had a player who needed to lose 10 kilos, let's say, over the summer? Like, what are your first three steps or whatever?
You said that the athlete wants to lose weight. So this is something I did not probably stress enough when answering the previous question. When losing weight, this is the most important factor that has influence on our health and on our other health markers, let's say levels of inflammation or glucose tolerance. And everything improves when we lose excess body fat. This is something we really must remember. So when we want to improve health, losing excess body fat, excess body weight is the most important thing we can do. So those methods only work. The methods like fasting or limiting carbohydrates and certain food groups only work because they achieve caloric deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't really talk about how that is only, how would I say,
How it is achieved or how is it
achieved
done?
only,
Yeah.
yes, that is something only significant for those methods. It goes for the reason here is those methods led to body weight loss. So if I would be in those, I am in those positions oftentimes. If we have an athlete that we see that the most important thing is to lose excess body weight, so we must understand how much energy that athlete needs to, let's say, support the training and how much deficit can we really achieve through reductions in caloric intake. So we must understand the energy balance and the energy intake. We have to start there.
Mm-hmm.
So when we assess that, we also need to take into the consideration what are the recommendations for protein intake, carbohydrate intake around, let's say, training sessions or competition, and what is the remainder that we can, let's say, schedule for fat intake.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to really understand the athletes' requirements for energy and for the most basic macronutrients. So this is the most important thing. And when we set those, let's say, levels, then
Mm-hmm.
we like to work with an athlete to tell us, okay, tell us now, this is something we have to achieve. We have to achieve this level of energy intake. We have to achieve this level of protein, carbohydrate, and fat intake. So how can we schedule this? This is something you need around training. This is something you can have, let's say, away from training, before bed or in the morning. Tell us, what do you like? What do you appreciate most? What foods do you like? So we won't start cutting out foods that somebody really likes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really the smartest thing to do. So this is something that we try to achieve.
Okay.
This is the most important thing, and now we have to adjust this to the athlete.
So if I understand correctly, the main thing is you tone down the energy levels so the caloric intake is less, but
Yeah,
you wouldn't go. People like drastic measures. You wouldn't like throw out the whole food groups or like a certain time of the day that they are allowed to eat. You would still let them to have 3 to 5 meals a day. Just the caloric intake would be
yeah,
smaller.
yeah. When we are talking about an athlete, even a recreational athlete, not
Mm-hmm.
even the professional athlete,
Mm-hmm.
two things really don't make sense in most cases. Limiting the whole part of the day when somebody is not eating, that does not really do anything good for supporting recovery and performance. It's really not a smart thing to do. So we like to have meals structured throughout the day, something in the morning or in the earlier part of the day and in midday and around training and then later at evening or night. So when do these meals come? That's like I said, it's part of a bigger plan that involves what athlete likes.
Mm-hmm.
But just like not eating the entire part of the day, like fasting, intermittent fasting, that really does not make sense for an athlete or a professional athlete. And the second thing that does not make sense is eliminating food groups if that is not really something we see must be done because of an intolerance or an allergy. So if somebody has, let's say, celiac disease, or if somebody is allergic to dairy, of course we're gonna limit that or go around that and put in a diet in different ways the missing macronutrients, missing nutrients in those groups. This is something we have to be responsible with. If we limit certain groups of food, we don't just limit dairy, or we don't just limit, let's say, grains. We limit the nutrients that come with those types of food. So we have to be responsible enough to find solutions in different foods, or using supplements, or trying to figure out how are we going to substitute that. So those are two things that don't really make sense. Limiting time restricted feeding and eliminating food groups if not required for health reasons. Of course, there may be certain cases where we are limited by time when we have to achieve something, or we are limited by weight. Let's say athletes that have weight classes. Those are exceptions where we have to maybe use different, more drastic measures to achieve that. Again, I'm trying to speak in a general manner that really is not the way to go in most cases.
All right, for sure. Because I know there's a lot of young athletes, parents, and coaches listening to this channel. So maybe just for the end, give us maybe 2 or 3 applicable things they can actually do to eat healthier, or to get their nutrition in order during the school, club, and every other activities they have.
This is something I like to say. Listen, if athletes, even recreational athletes, are well known for not really leaving their training plan to be unstructured, to be, let's say, something they do on a whim. They, in most cases, know what they train, when they train, how they train, when they have their massages or their physiotherapists or whatever. They like to be on top of things. So if we are like this, if we know we have to be in all those different areas, then why that does not apply to nutrition? So we have to translate that also to nutrition. We can't just eat whatever we want, whenever we want. We skip meals if we don't like them, or if we don't feel like eating them. We use all these different kinds of not really reasonable measures when thinking about nutrition. So the first thing I would suggest is just don't eat without knowing those basic things, how much energy your child, let's say an athlete, needs. Not skipping meals. You gotta have breakfast, then you gotta have lunch, you gotta have dinner, you gotta have in between meals, you gotta have workout nutrition.
So you gotta have a game plan when on what you're gonna eat, right?
A game plan.
Yeah.
You can't really afford skipping meals. Okay, maybe you drop, let's say, a snack, and if you have a plan then to adjust for that in a main meal or later. But you gotta have a game plan. You gotta know what you're doing. You gotta know how much energy your body needs, and you gotta know how are you gonna solve this problem. How are you gonna get enough protein? Which foods are you gonna get enough protein? How much protein are you gonna put in, let's say, lunch, dinner, breakfast? How many carbohydrates do you need around your training to fuel your performance? If you have two a days, maybe 2 trainings a day, how are you gonna replenish those glycogen stores in between? With what dietary sources? So are you going to drink some calories? Are you going to have some shakes or electrolyte drinks? So those are the basic questions you have to answer yourself. And even if maybe let's say you're a parent, you don't know that, you have to find coaching. You have to find help with an expert who can give you those answers. Not just, let's say, some methods. Okay, we're going to go now low carb, or we're going to cut meat, or we're going to go vegan, or those are methods. Those are not principles. We got to understand the principles. And the basic principles here are, like I'm always trying to point out, the energy balance, the protein, the carbohydrate needs. Those are something we have to understand, and we have to have a plan. How are we going to achieve that to support our training? We can't go around it. There's no shortcuts here.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I love the last statement, especially. Don't just use methods, because that's like shooting blindfolded, right? So
exactly.
Make sure you know what you do. Anyways, if you have any questions, guys, make sure you drop a comment. You can ask Mario anything you want, and we'll make sure we respond to that. So thank you, Mario, for a quick chat. That's all the time we have today.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.